It's time for us to argue about fantasy basketball. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I'm also a fresh maker. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_Beeble, on TikTok at redrock_Beeble, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Go to FanDuel.com right now to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms, so chuck in and get a double bang and get ready to go. Now, in the past, I've done shows like ADP battles we did for a few years and started that, and people are doing a lot of those shows now, which is cool. No problem with that, and we did some ranking discussions last season, but what I wanted to do is sort of spread it out a little bit. So we'll talk players in this little series of shows. We're going to talk concepts in fantasy, ideas, and all that sort of stuff with a bunch of different fantasy analysts. In today's show, we're going to talk to Thunder Dan Palyo, who you've seen around the traps. He does fantasy work for many different sports. He does DFS stuff as well. And he is here to talk to me about a few interesting players in fantasy that we have differing opinions on. So I might as well just bring him in for his first appearance on the show. So let's bring him in right now. Dan Palyo is here. Dan, welcome to the show for the first time.
Thanks, Josh, for having me. I'm a longtime fan of your work, and it's good to be here, brother. Thank you for bringing me on.
Yeah, good to have you here for the first time, but also to be the first person in this series of discussions and arguments regarding fantasy basketball and theories and strategies and players and valuations and all that sort of stuff. We're going to try and cover over the next week or so, and you're here to kick us off with that stuff. But before we do that, if people aren't familiar with what you do, like what is it that you do? Where can people find your stuff? We'll get that promo stuff out of the way straight up so people sort of know what they're working with here.
Sure thing. Yeah, you can find me on X at Thunder Dan DFS. I cover actually basketball, football, baseball, kind of all three sports, but I'm the lead NBA editor over at Rotoballer, kind of out in front of most of our season-long NBA stuff. And DFS stuff there too. So, yeah, check me out. I got a betting Substack that I run too because I do a lot of betting content and just a little bit of everything, really. So, yeah. Yeah,
I subscribe to Dan's Substack as well. So go and do that and get his insights through that. Dan, we are here to discuss fantasy and fantasy basketball player valuations. I gave my guests a little bit of a blank slate of things that they wanted to tell me that I was stupid about and things that I was wrong about and players that they disagree with me on, and I do the same with them. And you've given me a few names that you're interested in picking apart. And let's just start with this guy because he is a name I think there is discussion about Cade Cunningham in a lot of different spots in terms of the way that people value him. I think that he has got an outside shot at being a top 20 player. Don't think he will be necessarily. I think he's really comfortably inside the top 50 and probably a third round guy. I really value what he brought even last season as a third-year player who missed year two. He's shooting numbers, had some issues at the start of the season. He's not a big defensive guy in terms of the stats, but I believe in that strength of scoring and assists and high free throws, and I think heading into year four, we can get a free throw rate rise. But you think I'm wrong, so what's the problem? What's the story here?
Yeah, well, okay, so we'll start with the fact that he's never played more than 64 games in a season, and I know he had the injury year two, but even his first and third years, he's missed 20 games a season. I just have some concerns with Detroit in general, how they're gonna be this year, what they're gonna look like with under Bickerstaff, and in general, you mentioned kind of some of the weaknesses already when you were talking about the fact that he doesn't get a lot of defensive stats. He did improve his shooting last year, right? 45% from the field, yep. But still, not great. I guess not terrible if you're looking for guard stats. But really, it boils down to he's kind of just points and assists and free throw percentage. He's not a real well-rounded player. High turnover guy. I just feel like where you're looking at him in drafts, I just see other guys right there that I would rather have. Like he's being drafted in the same kind of pairing with like Fred VanVleet, who I think is a much better fantasy player and more, he's going to contribute more categories for you. Nothing, he doesn't really get any out of position stats or anything like that either. Can he continue to put up 7.5 assists? Is he going to be a true point guard? Is he more like a scoring guard? I mean, I don't really, I mean, we don't really know, depending on, he hasn't really played with these other guys that much.
I'm very confident that he is not a scoring guard. I'm very confident that he is a point guard. I'm very confident this team believes that he is a point guard. And I actually think with better players around him, the 7.5 passing to whatever that was, like passing to Tosan Evbwamwan last season, right? Like I'm pretty confident that when he chucks it out to Tobias Harris or to Malik Beasley, guys that aren't going to be demanding the ball in terms of running pick and rolls or needing it in their hands, I'm very confident that the fact that they signed Harris and they signed Beasley and they traded for Hardaway, it's like you're all complementary sort of pieces around this, and Cade is running things. So like even though he had like 32 usage, I don't necessarily think that's dropping necessarily. I think the assists could go up, and yeah, like the shooting numbers, there are concerns about that. The other thing that I would watch for, and this is a concern that there was slightly there last season, is that with playing a full season with Jalen Duren, his rebounds would go down, and they did. But at Media Day, Isaiah Stewart was like, yeah, I'm playing full-time center this season. So do we think that Isaiah Stewart is playing 17 minutes a night only and that Duren's playing 31? Or does that change a little bit? So Duren's, instead of playing 30, 31 minutes, maybe Duren plays 28 or 27. I just don't know. I don't know what Bickerstaff's going to do in that situation. But if Stewart's only playing center, that means he's a 17-minute-a-night player. I'm not really sure after he played 31 minutes a night last season that's going to happen. And if Stewart plays more, that means Cade has more ability to get rebounds because he's not playing with one of the best rebounders in the NBA. So that's another thing to watch. The thing that I think that I'm banking on a little bit here with Cade, and we did see this at the second half of last season, is he started to draw more free throws. He started to attack the rim better. He started to shoot the three ball better. I think his last 20-so games of the season, he was running at like a top, I'm going to say 25 to 30 value, playing with like absolute garbage. Now, he was playing against garbage in a lot of those games, but I'm trying to bank in that progression. And the rebound thing is the steals, whatever. They can change like that at any point, at any season. I just think that where we head in, we've played, 130 career games or something? And injury is a problem with that, obviously. But I was happy that he came back from the knee problem last season and actually looked stronger at the end of the season. And I just think that you said Fred VanVleet, and I agree with you. I would 100% take Fred VanVleet ahead of Cade Cunningham, even though their ADPs are similar. Yeah. I would take VanVleet 10 spots ahead of that. So I agree with that. But like, I guess if you're looking at that area of drafts where like Ja Morant goes or Jamal Murray goes in that area, how do you view him compared to those sort of players who go in that, like, what's Cade's ADP, like 35 or 36 or something in that sort of area? So I think I have him at a much higher value than those players.
Yeah, I like him better than both of those guys for sure. I'm not really a Ja guy. Murray is a constant injury concern. I have him further down my board too. So I guess again it comes down to like when you're comparing him to and where you're taking him. So you're comfortable taking him in the third round? Yeah. Even like the early third round? Like
we're talking about like pick like 27, 28. I guess it depends who's there. Like I would, and I don't know if everyone agrees this, I would probably take DeJounte Murray ahead of Cade maybe. But like there are people who would tell you that Cade is like not even a top 80 guy, and like, because his turnovers kill your value, and which is like, to me, that's a crazy idea. That is strictly adhering to the value on a ranking and not having any context behind it. That to me, that's a crazy idea to value him. But how old is he? 23, Cade? Like there's still room to improve it. And again, it is going to come down to whether he returns this value, whether he slides back 15, 20 spots, or whether he jumps up 12 spots. Is like, does he start to get 2 to 3 extra free throws a game? And does he finish at the rim? Yeah. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There was positive signs there. But like I just don't know. It is a tough one. There are people who just think that he doesn't contribute anything to winning. There are people, like you said at the start, who's like, I'm not sure he's a point guard. And I am very certain that he is a point guard, and I guess that's going to be the difference, isn't it? Yeah. That's because if you don't think he's a point guard, and then those assists drop off, and he averages 25 with 3.5 assists or 4 assists, and that's actually not that good. But if he gets 8 assists, then like that pushes even further. So that is a big difference. So I'd be interested to see what people who are watching and listening to this, how they view him as whether he's a point guard or best case he's like a point forward who plays with other ball handlers. I think that there's so many words that come out about the Luka Doncic comparisons and James Harden comparisons from teammates. I go, we want him to play that way. And I go, okay, I'm in. Like, I'm not saying he's going to do that, But that's where I'm in.
Yeah.
I want to take that flyer on a fourth year player.
I was listening to your Detroit preview too, and you mentioned like Jaden Ivey playing at the 2 with him doesn't make any sense, and it really doesn't, because you want to put them with those shooters, and hopefully JB does that. I don't know exactly how he's going to manage that team and what that rotation is going to look like, but gosh, I hope Duren plays 30 minutes too, because I really like him a lot. Not that we're talking about him, but the whole rebounds thing. But we'll see. It's interesting. I'm a Cavs fan, so I've watched a lot of JB over the years, and he has his guys. He kind of like has his certain guys he likes, and his defense guys, his rebounding guys. You know, he kind of has that mentality. So you can't just be a scorer. You got to be someone who's going to play both sides of the floor.
He also will lean heavily into the minutes of guys. Like, he will just push that tight rotation as well, and he has that experience of playing the 2 ball handlers in Garland and Mitchell together. Obviously, both of those guys are much better shooters than what Jaden Ivey is, and even what Cade is, to be honest. So that's going to be a challenge there. So it will be intriguing to see how they do that. But the Duren one is one that I've wrestled with for the last 2 months. It's like, okay, we're all expecting a big leap, but what if, with Harris there, with Fontecchio re-signing, with Holland and Asar, who probably need to play the 3 and the 4 as well, like, what if the coaching staff wants the spacing of Stewart and Duren's lack of defense and lack of shooting creates a problem? Like, I can't rule it out, and it worries me a little bit when we talk about that. I'm going to get back to talking about some other players in a second. We've got 2 more guys we're going to cover off here, but before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The season has started for the NFL, and you can get a big return on FanDuel right now because it is America's #1 sportsbook. You can be in the middle of a game and you're watching it, you're sitting down there, you go, I can see something developing, I can see a trend, I can see something cracking. So you open up FanDuel, you go to the page where the bets are placed, and you can see the live stats. They're updating in real time. You can see the live play-by-play. It's there too, and you can compare what your eyes and your gut is telling you. You can see the numbers. You can try and track that, and then you can place your bets all in that one spot. No flicking between tabs and open windows and open apps. It's all there straight on the FanDuel app. And if you are a new customer, you can go on to FanDuel, you can sign up, and you place a $5 bet. And if you place that $5 bet, win or lose, whatever, who cares, doesn't matter. You can get $200 in bonus bets back. So go to FanDuel.com, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. I am here, of course, with Dan Palyo, Thunder Dan DFS on Twitter. And so you don't love me having Cade in that spot, but you, on the other hand, like, you are a little bit higher than what I am on a big man. A big man in Oklahoma City by the name of Chet Holmgren. Chet is a guy that I love watching him play, right? To me, he's one of the best rim protectors that I've seen coming into the NBA in years, and like that includes Wemby. His positioning and timing is unbelievable, right? And we saw that last season. And there is plenty of scope to look at what Chet did and say that 16 and 8 with 2.3 blocks on 53 and 79, they're elite numbers very clearly, right? But he also tailed off as the season went on. He only played 29 minutes, and that could easily go up, except they brought in another center. All right, so that's a concern. Yeah. He was not a good free throw shooter at Gonzaga. He was fine, but he was like 71 or 72, and then he started out last year at about 85, and shooting like 40% from 3. And as the season went on, those numbers all came back. And I don't think that it's necessarily going to be like this, Dan, but there are drafts where Chet goes at pick 13. There are drafts where he goes at 15. And we've just had, I'm sure you've looked at this as well, and people have had the discussion about, hey, look what Karl-Anthony Towns did playing next to Rudy Gobert, and now that he's in New York, he gets to get his center stats back. What if he loses 10 center minutes because him and Hartenstein play together? What if that happens? And then he's a little bit further away from the basket, so rebounds might drop a little bit. Field goal percentage might drop a little bit. What if he starts off shooting those poorer numbers from the start of the season? What if blocks fall away from 2.3 to 1.9? I think that with that positional shift, which might happen, and what I know, Dan, is it'll happen more than it did last season. Chet played like 0 minutes, not at center, and I venture a guess that he will play more than 0 at power forward this season. That's a worry to me. What did he have usage-wise? 22. All right, so we bring Hartenstein and Caruso in. Not that they're high usage players, but they're just other guys there. So, like, does the usage compensate enough? Do the minutes compensate enough to take away from maybe percentages normalizing and that power forward hit that you can get? So I ask you this. I would not consider him at all at the turn. At the first round, not even remotely in my discussion to do that. Never would in a million years would I do that because... numerous reasons. I just don't think there's enough value there. The blocks are nice, but like if you're chasing blocks at pick 12 or 13, you're not catching Wemby anyway, most likely. So what are you doing? Trying to like be the third best team in blocks? I don't really get that because there's the AD team as well. And there's just too many unknowns around that for me to get like too interested in him. And I also want to sort of downplay the importance of blocks, because otherwise you get into the Walker Kessler problem, the Nick Claxton problem, the Jaren Jackson problem of overvaluing guys by 20, 30 spots. And we saw how well that worked out for literally every one of those players last season. So where do you want Chet? Like what's your positioning on him? Where are you comfortable taking him? Because I'm going to guess it's a lot higher than I am.
Yeah, so I think 12, 13 is a little high. I think once you get into that's mid part of that second round, that I think he's a really safe pick. But I think the question is, and you laid out everything beautifully in terms of like what's he going to do? How many minutes is he going to play at the 4? How many minutes is he going to play at the 5? What does his offensive arsenal look like at the 4? Is he going to be in the corner shooting more threes, which could be ultimately good for his points and for his threes? Is it going to take away from his blocks? I don't know. I know that with the Cavs playing Jared Allen and Evan Mobley still gets his blocks and can be a 7-footer playing at the 4. He can get blocks coming over playing help defense. I don't think he has to be at the rim guarding a center. And maybe it's even better that he's not. He's like 150 pounds soaking wet. Like I don't think he hit long term. It's good for him to be banging with big centers. I think to have him guarding a guy who's at the 4 is probably better for his. He played all 82 games last year. Like he finished like top 10 in on Basketball Monsters ratings. Right, he's a top 10 in not per game but in total value. So he's really durable last year. But anyways, point being, I think he's just a really good basketball player with a really good skill set. He's young, right? 21, 22 years old. Mm-hmm. I think it's very easy to say that he's shifting to the 4 is going to hurt him. Maybe the rebound. I can get on board with rebounds because Hartenstein is an elite rebounder per minute, right? He's going to. But is Hartenstein really a 30-minute player? Did they bring him in to play? He's a 25 to 28-minute player. Yeah. I think Chet's going to bump over and we'll see how they close out games. Are they going to want to close out games with Hartenstein? Or are they going to want to close out games small with Chet, the center, in the 4th corner?
I think it'll vary. I think they'll mix and match with that, which leads to
matchup.
Maybe that, like, especially if you're playing in a head-to-head league, with that some days you'll get more Chet at the 4, some days you'll get less, so there's more variance, less predictability with the numbers that he's bringing in, which is a problem. But I do want to just touch. You talked about Mobley, right? Which is really interesting. So I looked this up as you were talking, and you said about Mobley getting blocks from the 4, and this is like, I know you're not going to know the answer to this. So I'm going to throw it out there as a gotcha moment. But like, do you know what his block rate was at center versus power forward, as according to dunks and threes?
Probably better. Last year, probably better at center. I think he played a ton of minutes with Allen out. Yep.
So it is an unbelievable difference. At power forward, he had a 2.4% block rate. At center, it was 6. So that is like over double the block rate, and
significant. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that's we can say that with Towns as well. Go ahead.
What about Jaren Jackson?
He's the interesting one, isn't he? Because he is a guy that usually playing at power forward does does improve his block rate. So I'm just going to check how Basketball Dunks and Threes put that.
I'm curious.
They've also got him as playing majority of his time at center last season. Interestingly, 4.6% block rate at center, 4.1 at power forward. So about the same, but still higher at center, which actually does surprise me. But the year before, in 23, he had 8.6 block rate at center and 10.9 at power forward. So that does go the opposite direction. So, and to be honest, if we're talking about the Towns drop-off effect or even the Mobley drop-off effect, Chet is a rim protector at the Jaren Jackson level, not at the Towns. And as much as I love Mobley, he's much higher than the Towns and Mobley level rim protector. Right. But I think part of it, I'm not saying either way. I don't know for sure that he's going to see a block rate drop-off. He might play 4 extra minutes a game. Block rate drops, but the overall impact is the same. What I'm saying is that that risk exists, and I don't know because I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how that's going to impact him. Does Chet actually have scope to go higher than 22 usage? I'm not sure either. I don't know that he does that. Plus, as the associated drop-offs we saw from him shooting-wise, which were closer to the numbers that he put up through college, because obviously he started out with insane shooting to begin the year, and it did start to cool off. So we go like, where is he there? And I hate saying this because I love Chet. I think he's an awesome player. I think he's unbelievably good and so impactful. But so many of the things that he did last season on a per minute basis felt best casey, but not quite best case. Like he's obviously still got more to do. I just would be terrified of going inside the top 20 with him, I think, just because of those uncertainty.
You're feeling like he's being drafted at his ceiling more than anything. Like he doesn't have,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of get that, which is why again I feel like But again, his game is so nice for 9-cat. It's like, you don't have to worry about, you're not punting anything, maybe other than maybe steals or assists. I feel like he cuts a nice complementary piece. He's not going to force your build one way or the other. I don't know. Maybe it's like this kind of safety net thing where in the second round you have a whole bunch of guards who are bad shooters are going to take you down a certain road. I just think he's a really nice kind of all around player, and I think we agree on that. It's just more about you're talking about the risk of taking a guy that high who potentially could be already at his peak. I just think he's so young and the team is so good.
No.
That there's not a lot of risk there involved, and I think can probably do what he did last year or improve on it.
I think his floor value is safe, but I think the floor value is well behind where the ADP sits. So that's where I look at that. Like ESPN's got him ranked at 12. Like to me, the floor is safe, but it's not 12, right? Like it's not 12. Yeah. That's not the floor to me. Like best case he could be 12, but I'm not really looking at best case as that production. There's something else I was going to mention about Chet in terms of his numbers, because I do have his minutes increasing this season, but I just have some of those.
Yeah, I was hoping.
That's the other thing about him as well. Is that like we talk about where we take him, and obviously people are just drafting him second round, ADP 17 on Yahoo. That's the top half of the second round. But when you draft him there, right, you are at a significant disadvantage in the points category, because these guys in that range, Donovan Mitchell goes there, Anthony Edwards goes at the start there, Kevin Durant, these are 24, 25, 26, 27 point per game scorers, and he might be 18 or 19. Yeah. And catching that up,
right,
that does become harder to do, which is also a strategic idea of how we're building our teams, and like getting like what he averaged 16.5, like let's say he's an 18-point scorer this season. An 18-point scorer at pick 15 it puts you into like, I'm not sure I'm competing in points, and then that opens up a whole bunch of different things, positive and negative, but it does make it harder to deal with that.
That's fair.
With that point, which again is all sort of little nuancy things that we discuss in terms of also, if you're in a points league, like you're never touching him at this spot. Like that is way too high in a points league. So if you're considering Chet at those ADPs there, like we're not doing that there.
No, not points, not at all.
For
Roto and head-to-head though, I mean, whether it's Roto or head-to-head, I just think his game is really, really well crafted for either one. And but your point about the scoring is very valid. I think he pops out around, like you said, best case like 18, 19, maybe 19 and a half, something like that. And you bring up a great point. I mean, you need elite scoring early because it's much harder to get points later on. So,
like according to ADP, the two guys that go after him are Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. Then James Harden, Scotty Barnes, Jalen Brunson, Kyrie Irving, Damian Lillard, LeBron James. Like it's like 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25. Yeah. And then like you go, okay, so what am I doing here? Look, these guys are all got their first two players and they're averaging 50 points a game, and I'm there averaging like 42 or something with my first two players, which you go, okay, what are we, well, not 42, that's maybe I'm averaging 46, 47, which then becomes like, there, sure, write that category off, but it does force some decisions that need to be made. We've got one more to talk about, and this is one I really do want to get into with you, Dan. You brought it up as someone you were higher on than me, because I don't know. I'm just not. I've never been as big on Deni Avdija as others have been. There were people who thought it was a massive slide when he went in the draft to Portland. There were people who were obviously foolishly claiming that he was going to be the next Luka Doncic, which if you had eyes, you could tell that wasn't going to be the case, right? But people say that because, look, he's tall and he's from Europe.
He's Euro, right?
It was never going to be the case, and I'm glad we've gotten past that. Now, Deni is great, I believe, for what he does. A connector piece who can defend on the wing, who works well alongside other high-usage players, but that hasn't always translated well to fantasy. Now, last season, he started off fine. Like, he started the season, but it wasn't until sort of midway through the year that he started to get the ball in his hands more. He went on about a 50% three-point shooting streak for about 20 games through February, March, whatever it was. Numbers boosted right up. He only played 30 minutes a night for the second worst team in the NBA last season, averaging 15 and 7. I can't understand why we would consider that as a top 100-ish sort of player as some do. Like, I don't know where exactly you're thinking that he goes, but to me, it's a situation where if I have been preaching over and over about Deni, hey, if he's in a situation where he gets the ball in his hands, I actually like what he does. But when does he ever get the ball in his hands in Portland? Like, when does it happen?
Yeah.
Like, and you could easily argue, I don't know whether real. You could argue he's the sixth man on that team as well, because how do they fit everybody into all those positions? So first of all, obviously you're way higher on him than what I am, but like, where have you got him? Like, where are you reaching to get him in a draft? Like, what's your ideal? Like, I think this guy's maybe not even reaching because you can play the ADP game, but like, you're at 100. Would you say that I think he's the 100th best player?
Yeah, I do think he's right around that range. I mean, so much depends on. I mean, you've nailed it with like the rotation and the fact that he could be coming off the bench. He's played well off the bench before, but obviously his minutes are going to start to cap there, and he's not going to get to 30 minutes a night. I'm curious what happens with Portland this year. I'll be honest. Last year, I think everyone saw it coming. They knew that there were going to be by the end of the season, it was going to be guys getting shut down. It was going to be a disaster. All these other guys playing kind of silly season stuff with all these guys being, a huge waiver ads down the stretch, Delano Banton, guys like that playing who putting up huge stats. I don't know if you think they are more competitive or if they're not going to. Do you think if DeAndre Ayton plays, 80 games, you think Jeremy Grant's going to be there? Like, are those guys going to like literally play the whole season? Or I'm thinking Deni's more of like a second half kind of, not really a stash, but I think he's good. He's a good end of the bench guy early, and then by the end of the season, he could possibly do in Portland what he did in Washington: take on a bigger role, score more, get more shots up. Kind of what you're talking about, the things that are holding him back, the usage and the scoring.
That's true. He could do that in the second half of the year, but in a standard sort of format, right, in a head-to-head league format with daily changes, I can't wait for that to happen. Now, I think Portland. I've had this argument with people with Deni before who've said, yeah, now he's on a much worse team, so he's going to be able to do more. I go, bro, like, there is way more talent on this Portland team that is on the Washington team from last season. Like, he will be.
Oh, agreed.
He's the sixth in the usage pecking order. He is sixth. It's Scoot, it's Shaden, it's Simons, it's Grant, it's Ayton, right? All those guys are going to get their touches ahead of Deni. And three of those guys, or at least two of them, are point guards. And Deni works as sort of a point forward. And that's when his value used to come in Washington, not so much this year, but the year before, or even this year, it was when Poole got benched or it was when Beal got hurt. And then he would have the ball and he would run as a secondary ball handler. When the hell's he ever going to, when's he going to do that? I don't know when that's ever going to happen. And yeah, these guys could get hurt. These guys could get traded. This could all come together in March. But in most situations, I don't think you can wait for that. Now, I think he could come off the bench. I believe he will start probably, but I also go back on forward on that every day. But it's not one where I can say he's locked in on starting, right? And even if he does, you've still got to squeeze these minutes in because they've also got two of the best defensive small forwards, like honestly, in the game. Now they have their issues offensively, but Tamani Kamara and Matisse Thybulle are unbelievable defensively.
Yeah.
And they all play a similar position to Deni. So, like, where do they fit? Do you want to get any minutes with Rob Williams at the 4 next to Ayton? Because that's another position. It's a team that is bad with a lot of players who are not good, but they all should be somewhere getting minutes. And he doesn't do enough per minute for me to get excited to think he's going to blow these guys away. Now, I guess I'll throw an argument in your favor here is that they gave up a shitload to get him for whatever reason. So, like, what's best case, do you think, for Deni? Like, how does he get to this spot where if you think you've got him at 100 and you think it's more going to be second half, like, how is he rolling at, like, top 75 second half? What happens for him to do that?
Yeah, well, you mentioned at the 4 too. Like, I don't know if you can really play some of those two of those big men together. I don't know if Robert Williams at the 4. I think he's a kind of a fun small ball 4.
Oh yeah,
and
I think it's his best
I
position.
like him there a lot. Yeah, me too. Right, like I think that would be his ideal spot with them running small. I guess it really just it comes down to one of those guys either getting traded, getting hurt, at least one, maybe two. Simons is a guy that struggled to stay healthy too. I'm not trying to pick on all these guys. Scoot missed a lot of time. It just feels like, and when you're in that culture of a losing, like that, when they're hurt, they're not rushing to get back. They're more than willing to sit guys down the stretch that when they're tanking. I mean, it just feels like that losing culture kind of pervades, and that would, some of those things would have to happen, I guess, for him to kind of to have a ceiling type situation, top 75. But again, he does enough across the board. I think with threes, steals, blocks. I mean, he's pretty solid in the peripheral stats to where I don't think he necessarily has to be he's a great like glue guy, like you mentioned. That's kind of where his strength is. The assist could take a hit. I acknowledge that. I don't think he's getting 4 assists a game, unless he's handling the ball more, which probably doesn't happen. But yeah, I just think he's another guy who just he's got a nice 9-cat skill set, and I think as long as there's minutes, and that's the big question, that he can produce.
His average was at 20% for the season, but it didn't tick over 20 until basically the middle of January. So he was rolling well below that, and then we saw things change with the Wizards. We think that might have been around even the time that they fired Unseld. Poole started to move to the bench, and the things started to change around. And then he went on a run where his usage was running at 23, 24 down the stretch, but it was like a switch in the idea of the way they were running things. And yeah, at the start of the year, he was like 16, 17 usage despite being a starter and having these 9% usage games, 8% usage games, like really, really low. So I guess that's part of my concern there. But also, I'll acknowledge that when I look at this stuff, it's like I'm looking at it going, I'm assuming that most of these guys are going to be healthy, and that's not going to be the case, because if Grant gets hurt, if Sharp gets hurt, if Simons is hurt, if Scoot is hurt, Deni's the guy that benefits every single time. Right, so there is that. He has that advantage. Like, he will fit in. Like, if Grant is hurt, then cool, Deni plays the 4. If Sharp is hurt, Deni plays the 3 or plays more of the 3. And if Scoot is hurt, then everyone shifts down and Deni slides in. And the same if Simons is hurt and everyone shifts down. Like, he's got that 6th man across all positions, because everyone else everyone else is interchangeable, except if like Ayton goes down, and that doesn't really impact him at all. But that's probably the only one there. But there is that shiftability with all those stuff. I just think I guess he's a high upside guy if like 3 major thing happens. Is how I look at it. I'd need probably one guy to get traded, one guy to have a long-term injury, and one of those guys has to be a primary ball handler for me to think that there is that upside to him. But I don't know. I'm also not willing to buy a 35-game sample size on a team that lost about 25 games in a row down the end of last season, which is when he put those numbers up. I'm not going to go, well, you know what? I think it's all figured out. Deni led them to 0 wins over that period of time. And that's an exaggeration, Dan. Yeah. But it's also not that much of an exaggeration.
It's not. It's not. They're garbage time games, garbage stats. You're right. Like, if you look at even like his per 36 numbers, he went from like 12, 8, and 4 to like 17, 8, and 5. Like, that's a huge jump. Yep, and a lot of that, like you said, is a product of and he did the same thing 2 years in a row with those per 36. So all of a sudden it was and Washington was playing fast, playing loose, playing like backyard basketball, didn't care, and just stat padding. So I acknowledge that he's probably not doing that again. But, again, is Portland going to play that way a little bit? Is Portland going to end up with some of those games in the second half of the season? Like, probably a little bit too. So
let me throw this food for thought out there for you and for everyone else listening, is that, like, I would guess if you polled Joe, man on the street, and said, Deni Avdija, what is he? Like, and you say, 3-3 and D player. Like, yeah, that's what he is, right? I think that's people's idea, that he's become this knockdown shooter, and that's what he does. And he shot 38% from 3 last season, so that's fair enough. But he shot 29.7 the year before, 31.7 the year before, 31.5 the year before, and he's had exactly one season where he shot over 75 from the line, and that was 76.1 2 years ago. So I'm not willing to say that Deni's a good shooter. Like, I'm not willing to say that, considering it was a big spike second half of last season. The free throw percentage didn't go along with it. He wasn't a good free throw shooter, which is often a good comparison. And he's done this for 40 games, and one of those indicators being free throw percentage didn't really tick up. So that's, again, just having a level of skepticism in there. And I think he's more likely a 33% shooter than a 38 or 39% shooter from 3, which then impacts a lot of the other efficiency stuff. But maybe it's figured out, and that is a possible. That's like me saying I think Cade's figured stuff out, and you're saying I'm not so sure, and me saying I'm not sure Deni has, and you go, yeah, I think he has. There's a big opportunity here, and it's just about how you evaluate the players, and that is why this stuff is also fun, Dan, because we don't know. We can come back here in April and go, haha, you're an idiot, and you can say the same thing to me because we got it wrong, but that's how we approach it. And what I like to do in these sort of things is tell you why. Like, tell you why I think this, and you tell me why you think this, and people can go, oh, that makes sense, or that makes sense, or throw your hands up in the air and go, I guess we'll find out in 4 months' time.
Right.
Dan,
awesome.
It was awesome to have you on for the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last time as people see your work and you come on here and discuss a bunch of stuff about fantasy. Give us again one more plug, the Substack, the Twitter, all that stuff that you do.
Yeah, at Thunder Dan DFS. Check me out right now. I'm covering the NFL, but also getting my rankings together for NBA, and putting out some NBA content and fantasy basketball content here soon. In between all of it, but listen, man, it was great to come on. I think you, and I watched your show all the time. I think you are better than anybody in terms of just like explaining your methodology, explaining your process, laying everything out there, and then letting everybody decide too. Like, here's the information, here's how I see it, and that's really what it's all about. Like, let people make their own decisions, but just give them all the information they need.
Thanks, man. If you just had kept going, I was almost there. I was so close. Well done. Thank you. Appreciate the comments, appreciate the praise, and appreciate you coming on and offering different perspectives, because that's really what it's all about, isn't it? Is that we can have opinions, but it doesn't mean that it's true. Right. It doesn't mean that it's the only way to approach it, and that's what this whole series is going to be about. Dan Palyo, thank you for coming on and arguing with me about fantasy.
You got it, anytime.
All right, Dan, great guest as usual. Well, not as usual. Dan's a great guest whenever show he is on. It's the first time he's been on here, but he's going to be a great guest every time he comes on. And I hope you guys took something away and had a thought or think about how you value Cade and how you look at Chet and how you value Deni, whether you agree with me, whether you agree with Dan, or whether you just mix and match your opinions. That's totally cool. That is what we're about. We're trying to figure things out and approach things from a perspective of evidence and trends and ideas and ways of best case and risk and all that sort of stuff. That's what makes this game so fun. And it's also super fun when you hit the thumbs up button on YouTube and you subscribe on audio, and you do the same on YouTube as well. Operation 100K on YouTube is still there. I hope we get there. I don't know that we will, but I do always hope it. So if you haven't hit the subscribe yet, do it now. And guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.